Hey folks, Mr. Hughes here, down in Hughes Studios, and today what I want to talk to you about is layers. Now it's important to note what we're going to talk about today can be applied to any software that involves layers. So just because we're talking about layers in photo editing software, this concept can be applied to graphic design software, anything that allows you to create layers within the software. So as a quick recap, let's use this photo of the Mona Lisa, which has been opened from Wikipedia. And I'm going to zoom in on it to remind you that every bitmap image is made up of little pixels. So a reminder, that's basically like color by number. All the little dots are given a color code. We're going to use this concept and we're going to basically stack pixels on top of each other. So if you're thinking about, when you're painting, if you paint one color on top of another, those two colors will mix together and create a new color. What we can do with pixels, though, is we can actually stack them so that they don't interact with each other. So, let's take a look at a little graphical representation of this. So here's an individual who has made a poster for an athlete, and they've stacked pixels on top of each other. So if you look at the breakdown of this image, if we look at just the image in the bottom right-hand corner down here, you're going to see that there's some black and white in the background. There's a photo of the athlete here in the middle. There's kind of this red border going around the outside. There's a black border also around the outside here. There's some text that's been stacked on top of it. On the left-hand side, it kind of shows the breakdown of that, how they did the black and white in the background, then they did, the athlete's photos, then they did the black border kind of around the outside, the red border, and then all the text stacked on top of each other. So when you're looking at it from a top-down perspective, you're seeing the text first, then the red, then the image, and it all works very nicely together. So with that said, let's jump into the concept of layers. If we come back to this photo of the Mona Lisa, I'm going to look at the layers palette over here on the right hand side. Now if you don't see this palette, if it is not there for you, simply click on, from the menu, Window, and you'll see Layers, and that will make it appear for you. And if we look at this, you're going to notice that there is only one layer. So in that photo of the athlete that we saw that there was a lot of layers stacked on top of each other, making this cool image. To finalize an image, you've got to squish it. You've got to basically say, okay, now make all those pixels squish down to one layer. And that will allow you to then email the photo, show it on a screen somewhere, put it on the website, whatever the case may be. So this image has been what's called flattened. They've taken all the layers and squished it down so it's only one layer. Let's take a look at an image where that hasn't happened and we can actually manipulate the layers. If you look at the description of this video down below, you're going to see a link for the file layers.psd. So if you'd like to follow along with this lesson and do as I do when I do type thing, you're more than welcome to get that file, pause the video, go get that file and open it in your photo editing software. Again, we're using Photopea for this lesson, but you can use GIMP, you could use Photoshop. This lesson really applies to any photo editing software that has layers in it. They are very similar. So if you have the file open, you're welcome to follow along. Otherwise, you can just watch and get the information that way. If I look at the layers palette of this file, though, you'll notice that there are multiple layers, just like the photo of the athlete. So we have a layer for the background right here, which is all of this in the background. It's all white. Then we have a layer for the green rectangle, which is sitting right here. We have a layer for the blue rectangle, which is right here. And we have one for the red rectangle, which, you get it, is right here. So what we can do with these layers, because they're stacked on top of each other, we can actually move the pixels around. So you'll notice here, if I go from top down, because remember, you'll always see the top at the front and the bottom always at the back, I can move these layers around. So the red rectangle should show up first, as it does. The blue rectangle should show up second, as it does. Or let's test that in a second. And the green rectangle shows up in the background, which looks like it's right. Now the red and the blue are kind of, well, is the blue really behind the red? Let's find out. By simply clicking the blue rectangle layer and grabbing your move tool, which is the arrow tool here at the top, I can actually take this blue rectangle and move it, and you'll notice that it is indeed behind the red rectangle. So let's move that around. Let's actually move it behind the red rectangle and watch what happens if I drag the blue rectangle up. You're going to notice that now it's in the front. So you can actually move these rectangles around to change which one is in front or in behind or in the middle or whatever the case may be. It's important to note when you're working with a layer that you have the layer selected, and that's going to come up more in a video that we're going to be doing later. But get in the habit of, if you're going to work with a layer, then you can go ahead and click on it. For now, in selection, we'll talk about how we can fix that. So there I was moving the red rectangle. Now here's the one. If I take the background, which is completely white, and I drag it all the way to the front, it looks like I've deleted everything, but no, actually what you've done is you've taken all those white pixels and you said show them first. Well, there's so many white pixels that it covers up all the other rectangles. So how could I fix that? Well, you can obviously just drag it back, but if this was something you did want in the front for some reason, okay, maybe in your design you're going to play around with it or whatever, but you just need it to go away for now. I just don't want to see it for now, but I'll bring it back later. Well, I can just click the eyeball and it goes away. I haven't deleted the layer. We'll show you how to do that in a second. All I've done is I've turned it off. I said I don't want to see these pixels right now. So you'll notice if I click the eyeballs, they all start going away. If I click the eyeballs again, they start coming back. And a good indication if it's invisible or not is obviously the eyeball itself. If you can see the eyeball in white, then it's turned on. And if it gets grayed out, then it's been turned off. So that's a good indication as to whether or not it's invisible or not. So let's move the background all the way to the back. So that's how layers work in any piece of software, okay, whether it's photo editing or graphic design. Now, with this though, working with layers, let's talk about how to manage your layers and organize them a little bit better, because as you can see, if you had a really complex design, you're going to have so many different layers that you want to start organizing it just like the files on your computer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you 3 buttons down here that are really important when it comes to layers, and I'll just highlight them here. So we've got 3 buttons that are really important. The first 2 are fairly simplistic. So that is your new button, which is right here, this little, looks like a little piece of paper right here, and your delete button, which is right there. If you want a new layer to work with, all you have to do is click on this little page and you get a new layer. Now you can start painting on it, you can add pixels, you can bring an image in, you can do really whatever you wanted to this layer. Take a look at the name though. It's not very descriptive. It says layer 1. Well, if you've got a layer of 100 images, or 100 layers, sorry, if you've got an image of 100 layers, that's better, that's not really going to help you out. So you'll see here on the side, we get a little preview of what's on that layer, but sometimes you got a lot of detail. It's not really easy to see. So having a name like layer 1, not very descriptive. So what I'm going to do here, I can double click on it and just give it a new name. So make sure that you're double clicking on the name itself. That's really important. I'll double click, you'll notice it gets highlighted, and now I can call it whatever I want. So I'm going to call this delete me, because I don't need it. I'm going to be deleting it here in a second. Press enter, and now it's got a more meaningful name. So if I was looking at my layers later and trying to find out where it is, I can see by having a nice name there for it. Like I said, I don't want this layer. I was just making it for testing purposes, or maybe you had extra layers in your program. You decided, well, this is the one I want to go with. I want to trash this one. And that helps you save space later on too. I'll take the delete me layer, and I will simply click the trash can, which is right beside the new layer button, and it's gone. So now we've got a situation where, again, we can add a layer or get rid of a layer. In the case of the rectangles, right, that's taking up 3 layers within my layers palette. And maybe I want to treat them all as one. I'm going to have all my rectangles together and all my circles together, and I've got a whole bunch of different shapes. What you can do is you can group them together by using this little folder button right here. To do this, really simple, there's 2 ways to select your layers. You can either hold shift, and what that will do is the first and last layer that you'll select, it will highlight them all. So watch what I mean. I'm not going to include background in this group, but I'll do it just for the selection so you can see what happens. If I hold shift on my keyboard, it highlighted everything between the first layer and the last layer, which is kind of cool. Okay, so I can go green to red or blue to background. Okay, it selects them all. If you wanted to skip one, like maybe I want green and red, I don't want blue selected at all, use Control or Command if you're on a Mac. Control PC or Command if you're on a Mac. So if I hold Control, notice the blue one didn't get selected. So I'll select the green one, hold Shift, select the red one, and I'll click this grouping folder right here. And you'll notice it looks like they all disappeared, but they didn't. They've actually been added to this folder. So if I click that little drop-down arrow, there they all are. And do you see how it keeps your layers palette a little bit more organized? So it's kind of a nice thing to have. Again, folder 1, not very descriptive. Let's rename it with the same process. Double click and call it rectangle. Okay. So what did that just get us? Why did I do that? Well, it keeps you more organized in your layers palette, 1. It allows you to now, remember how when we wanted to turn the rectangles off, we had to click each one individually? Well, if I wanted to turn them all off, now I can just click one eyeball and they all turn off because they've been grouped. You're saying treat them as one. Whatever, you go, we go, you get turned off, we get turned off. It applies it to all of them. And the last thing is, if I wanted to move them as a whole, like if I move one rectangle, I want them all to move, I can select the group now, not the individual layers, hold or grab the move tool and simply move them around my screen. So that is the concept of layers. We talked about creating and deleting a layer, renaming a layer, moving layers around, turning them on and off, and grouping them. So hopefully with that, you have a better idea of how layers work and you're ready to create some really awesome projects using the photo editing software of your choice.